Welcome to CNN 10, your source for objective explanations of world news. My name is Carl Azus. This is our second to last show of the season. After tomorrow, we'll be off the air until January 3rd. We're starting with news that a former lawyer for U.S. President Donald Trump has been sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. Last month, Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to lying to Congress. There's an ongoing investigation involving Russia and the 2016 U.S. presidential election, and Cohen admitted he misled Congress about a proposal to build a Trump property in Russia. Cohen originally said that discussions about that ended in January of 2016 when they had actually continued through the spring. But that wasn't the only crime Cohen committed. In August, he pleaded guilty to 8 federal charges in a separate investigation. Those included 5 counts of tax fraud, 1 count of lying to a bank, and 2 counts of breaking campaign finance rules. Those last 2 counts might involve President Trump because Cohen says Trump directed him to break those rules. The president says no crime was committed because campaign finance funds weren't used the way prosecutors say they were. The judge who sentenced Cohen says his crimes were, quote, a veritable smorgasbord of fraudulent conduct. Cohen said he took full responsibility for his actions and he criticized the president. The lawyer said, quote, time and time again, I felt it was my duty to cover up his dirty deeds. Earlier this month, President Trump said Cohen lied to get a reduced prison term and should serve a full and complete sentence. Meanwhile, the special counsel investigation continues into alleged Russian interference in the 2016 election. Across the Atlantic, in the United Kingdom, unease over the Brexit from the European Union hangs in the air.
Long shadows on Westminster Bridge, and with them an abiding sense of weariness and fracture. The last few weeks of British politics have been both divisive and interminable.
We remain concerned that time is ticking. Some of my constituents would like Brexit to be over and done with.
The cartoonists have been predictably merciless. Theresa May on her marks going her way, everyone else in the opposite direction. Both cartoons from a Conservative newspaper.
As I have made clear, my focus is on the vote that will take place on the 11th of December here in this House.
And 5 days later...
This argument has gone on long enough. It is corrosive to our politics, and life depends on compromise.
And a further 6 days later, facing the prospect of a resounding defeat, she postponed the vote.
Does this House want to deliver Brexit?
Those looks. Nothing else, Theresa May has been admired for her tenacity and resilience.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
A week, as they say, is a long time in politics, even at Christmas. So the lady is for turning, exclaimed the Daily Telegraph. The fact is, Britain still seems profoundly split over Brexit, and so toxically are the 2 main political parties, and tempers are fraying.
The Prime Minister is trying to buy herself one last chance to save this deal. If she doesn't take on board the fundamental changes required, then she must make way for those who can.
We still, even now, don't even know when she wants to bring this vote back. That's right. Or even what she wants the deal to be. Does she not realise how chaotic and ridiculous this makes our country look?
The Guardian cartoonist has persistently pinioned Theresa May to Moby Dick, in the water and at the cliff edge. But like good old John Bull, we're all now wondering what's going to happen next. One Labour MP in this place of historic ritual simply vented his frustration by briefly grabbing the ceremonial mace. He was asked to leave the House. Of course, as everyone is aware, this is only the beginning of the Brexit process. A trade deal with Europe has yet to be negotiated. Outside Parliament, the flags have been out, both British and European. Protesters for and against Brexit have been encamped for days. Some political commentators perceive Britain in limbo, teetering on the edge of a precipice, a constitutional crisis in prospect. Nick Glass, CNN, Westminster.
But for Prime Minister Theresa May, there was some good news that broke last night. She won a confidence vote from her own political party. Here's what that means. Prime Minister May can continue in her job as Britain's leader. The vote tally was 200 to 117, with the majority of Conservative Party members indicating they do have confidence in Prime Minister May. Before the vote, she said she would not run for re-election in 2022, and as a result of the vote, she'll get at least another 12 months before her party could even hold another confidence vote. But she still has a difficult job ahead of her. Britain's Parliament has to approve any final deal on Brexit. There's a lot of opposition in Parliament to the Brexit deal that the May administration negotiated with the European Union, and the EU says it's not going to renegotiate that deal. So the British leader's still caught between a rock and a hard place. But while one of her rivals called on Prime Minister May to resign, she says she's going to get on with the job of delivering Brexit and building a better future for her country. 10-second trivia. Which U.S. president first declared the war on drugs, calling drug abuse public enemy number one? Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, or Ronald Reagan? It was in 1971 that President Richard Nixon increased government funding to control drugs in America. More than 4 decades later, drug abuse is still a problem in America, but the type of drug that's most abused has changed. A new report from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control says it's fentanyl, a man-made painkiller. The CDC looked at drug overdose deaths between the years 2011 and 2016. At the beginning of that period, fentanyl was involved in about 4% of all drug-related deaths. 5 years later, it was involved in almost 29% of overdose deaths. That's more than heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine. Fentanyl is an incredibly potent painkiller, and there are medical uses for it. People with severe pain or those who've just had surgery are sometimes prescribed fentanyl. But it's also made and sold illegally. It's sometimes combined with other drugs, and that makes fentanyl even more deadly. Drug overdoses are one major reason why the U.S. government says Americans' life expectancy has declined for 3 years in a row. The last time that happened, World War I and the Spanish flu were claiming lives. Fentanyl is classified as an opioid like heroin, hydrocodone, morphine, or methadone. What makes these drugs so addictive and so dangerous?
Every 8 minutes, someone in America dies from a drug overdose. Now, most of the time it's from an opioid like heroin or illicit fentanyl, but also opioids like oxycodone or hydrocodone, the ones prescribed by doctors. Take too much of any of these opioids and it can be deadly. That's because they all work the same way. They can dull pain and boost dopamine, giving some people a high, but it's easy to get hooked on them. Why? Well, for one, your body can build up a tolerance. The more you use, the larger dose you may need to get the same relief. Secondly, you can become dependent on them. In fact, your body releases natural opioids when you hurt yourself. But if you habitually use opioids, your body stops producing its own and relies on the drugs instead. If you try and stop then, the body goes through withdrawal. In fact, more Americans now die from opioids than from guns.
The American Kennel Club recommends that you put boots on your dog if you live somewhere that gets a lot of winter snow and ice. South Dakota gets a lot of snow and ice, so the Rapid City Police Department strapped some boots on Jerry the police dog for him to get used to, except he doesn't really seem to be getting used to them. An officer eventually starts playing with Jerry, presumably to distract him and get him comfortable in his new boots. There's no doubt they seem to give him pause, but they're not injurious. They're just like another layer of metatarsals to keep his feet inclawlated and ensure his bark is worse than his frostbite. I'm Carl Azus for CNN.